Everyone has moments in life they can't just stop thinking about. They can be embarrassing things, like that one time you face planted in front of a group of teenagers, or something amazing like the first time you hosted your family for the holidays. And on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, hosted by me, Keke Palmer, and presented by BMW, we know to savor the good memories and let go of the bad. And one thing everyone remembers fondly is their first time behind the wheel of a BMW. So come join me and BMW this summer as we explore pop culture moments and topics you just can't stop thinking about on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, sponsored by BMW, the ultimate driving machine.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth. And this episode is a little different because we're taking a break from chatting about kinder trauma to talk about the genre films that really resonated with us this year.
Yeah, we are. And by year, we mean a decade.
Yeah, I know. And I go, because it was hard to pick this year. Because it's so for me this year, it was a bunch of festival films that we saw last year came out this year officially. And so I forgot so many movies that I'd already seen actually got, distribution this year.
Right.
There were some huge reboots / franchise stuff. And I don't know. I thought there was a lot of really cool shit this year.
Yeah. It's looking back at this year and then looking back at what kind of made our top of the year last year. The thing is that I think there's a lot of films this year. Like my top 10 could have easily been a top 20. Oh, there's a lot of really good films this year. My problem this year for me personally was that there was nothing that resonated with me to the same degree that happened last year. I mean, last year, my top 2 was like Relic and Possessor. And honestly, as much as I love a lot of the movies that I'm going to be talking about today, none of them really hit that kind of emotional resonance for me for some reason.
Interesting.
Yeah, but there's a whole lot. There's a whole lot
I know. There was so much out this year. And that's I was looking at my top and I was like, how the fuck do I choose? I don't know how to choose.
Yeah, I struggled too to narrow. I struggled the entire time. I struggled getting my top 10, and then I struggled with figuring out what was my top 5. this was a struggle this year, and I don't know if it's just because this year has felt exceedingly long, or if the COVID shit from last year has been lingering with me, and so I don't know if I'm just not able to feel joy in the same way as last year. I don't know. It's I don't know. I don't feel as powerful about a lot of these films this year, although there are some really good ones, and I'm excited. I'm really excited to hear your list, Mary Beth.
I'm so curious to hear your list too, because I feel like I don't know how different they're going to be, but I feel like they're going to be pretty different.
I actually do too. Last year, it was almost we were just repeating our list back and forth at different times. We had different orders and stuff. But I honestly do not know. But aside from one that I would be surprised isn't in your top 10, I don't really know what's going to be on your list, and that's exciting for me.
Me too. I know. I'm very excited.
Okay, so one of the things that I was thinking we should try this year is talk about new movies that we hadn't seen before that we ended up seeing because of this podcast, because there was a number of new movies for both of us.
Yes. And I was so excited when you mentioned doing this, because this was a really good year for movies that like I finally got to see or like hadn't even heard of and wouldn't have seen. Mm-hmm. So I'm super stoked to talk about some of them.
Yeah, me too. Let's start off with one of your favorites. I want to hear.
Oh, my favorite. So I finally got to see The Fly.
Yeah.
With Rob Jabaz. I have been meaning to watch The Fly for so long, and it always was just like, never watched it. And I finally got to watch it for that episode with the director of The Sadness, which is like a fucking trip and a half. And it's such a good movie, and it's such a good love story, and it's so tragic and heartbreaking and goopy and gross. And I was just so stoked to finally watch that movie and like finally understand just how good it was. So
goopy and gross, the best way for love stories to be told.
Exactly. What's love without a little goop and gross? Ew.
Speaking of goop and gross, one of the things that I discovered this year is TikTok.
Oh my god.
And
what a transition. What a transition.
This just came into my head because like TikTok has read me for filth this year in terms of like figuring out what I like quicker than anything else has ever done. But like what I've discovered is that when you fall down the gay TikTok rabbit hole, that there is this pop punk song that someone has written and debuted on TikTok that is everywhere, and it has been stuck in my head, and it's called Keep Writing Me, and I think all y'all should go out and listen to this one because the lyrics are like, he's my number one daddy, gonna make him cream inside of me. So goopy and gross, love story. Yes. So that has been like all over TikTok and in my head for the last couple of days, and I cannot get it out, and I hate it here. You're welcome.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Wow. So, pivoting from there, what about you? Gonna just pivot away from that weird shit.
I think one of my favorites, speaking of weird shit, is Liquid Sky, which we talked about with Mickey Reese. The only kind of movie that the director of The Climate of the Hunter and of Agnes would possibly have as a movie that scarred him as a young kid, or in his case, a teenager. And that was Liquid Sky. What a wild movie.
It was just so cool. Like, I can't even like begin to like describe like what that experience was like, about like it's queer and kind of like a rape revenge movie and sex aliens and like defined a lot of like rave culture stuff, and it was just like the weirdest thing. And then Mickey Reese was like, yeah, I watched this when I was 18 when I was tripping balls, and I was like, yep. And so it was like so different from something we usually did, but it was really cool. Like, it was kind of cool to break our format a little bit. Bend it a little bit for this weird ass movie that I now own on Blu-ray.
Same. But you did miss the most important part of that movie, though, and that was me and my rhythm box. Me and my rhythm box.
I did forget about that part, and I apologize because that is an incredible part of that movie. And so a couple others that I really like. I had a bunch that I like, as we all know, I'm a little bit behind on some things sometimes. So there's a couple others that I really loved. One was Dead and Buried that we watched with Mike Snoonian, and I found that. I was like, all of the, like, a lot of these movies I have found at my local, my favorite comic book store, because they now have started selling boutique DVDs and Blu-rays, and I was just like,
hell yeah,
thank you, Jesus. Like, I can order them online, but it's just cool to, like, give some money to my local comic book store.
Yep.
But Dead and Buried was so surprising. Like, did not expect it to be kind of so harrowing and a look at mortality. Like, so incredible. I'm just going to blow through a couple of them just because, like, it was pretty brief. But then The Beyond by Fulci, which we watched with Trevor Henderson, was so fucking good. April Fool's Day with Jessica Scott. I know that was both of our first times watching it. And Muffy St. John.
Muffy St. John.
Like, that movie, again, cheesy but funny and crazy. Like, just very different than what I expected. So, like, those were I have a couple more.
Queer-coded soccer?
Wait, queer-coded soccer. Like the gay characters that were like, they're definitely gay, right?
At least bi.
Yeah,
yes.
at least bi. So, and then I'll save the last one that I want to talk about. The Night School by Travis, from when we did, and we talked about that with Travis Stevens, the director of Jacob's Wife and The Girl on the Third Floor. Night School is like a weird American giallo movie that I, again, was super surprised by. And as soon as I saw it, I bought it on Blu-ray because I was so impressed with it. So, like, a couple of these were kind of, like, hidden gems that I think not a lot of people talk about in general. But, yeah, those were some of my favorites. And I'll save the best for last. Or one of the best for last. But what about you, Terry?
Yeah, my other two that really popped for me, one was surprised the heck out of me that I enjoyed as much as I did, but that was Amityville Horror 1992. It's About Time. Not a great movie, but a great first time watch.
Movie. Like, yes. I, again, bought it on Blu-ray. I was like, I just need to own this movie. Like, it's so ridiculous, but I'm so glad I own it because I can show it to other people.
Yep, and that was brought to us by Lindsay Travis, and honestly, probably my favorite episode of the year.
Seriously, because that was the one, like, so if you guys remember, it was pretty recent, but she was terrified of this movie, like, and revisited this movie just for us, and it was incredible. Like, it was an incredible, like, this the whole package around it, and I think that's one of the reasons why we probably both loved it so much, was it was just, like, her, like, the context of Lindsay around it just made it even better.
She's just a delight to talk to as well.
And yeah, and so we're just very grateful that she traumatized herself for us and was also able to maybe overcome her fear a little bit. So
yeah. And my last one would be Orphan with Hannah Mae Cummings, which first time I'd ever watched it, knew the plot twist, knew all of that going in, but I had never ever seen it before, and it was amazing. It was so good.
I'm so glad that you watched that movie for the first time for the podcast, because I love that fucking movie so much. And hearing your reactions to it, like, so good. Especially seeing it, like, over a decade later and being like, is this still good? I'm like, oh, no, it's still pretty good. I mean, it makes no sense, and, like, it's ridiculous, but it's, like, a camp masterpiece.
Camp classic.
It's a camp classic.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for the sequel, prequel,
so
whatever it's called.
For it. Oh my god, it's gonna be so ridiculous. I cannot
prequel,
wait.
I guess.
Is it a Yeah, it is a prequel.
Yeah, it's a prequel because she dies. So, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So it has to be a prequel, but with an older woman playing an even younger child. It's gonna be interesting.
It's gonna be interesting.
I have a feeling that might also be camp.
Wait. And then my final one is Society, which we watched with Adrian Torres. Shunting.
Squelch, squelch, squelch.
So that was just like an incredibly nasty, weird thing that I finally got to watch, and I'm so glad I did, because boy oh boy, is that shit incredible. And goopy and fleshy and disgusting. Yeah, we had some really cool episodes this year. It was hard to pick.
We did.
Like, but these were a lot of the ones that we had never seen. There were some really good ones that people movies we've already had already seen. But we got to watch some cool shit this year and talk to some cool people.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, and so next up, we're going to talk about some of our favorite moments from this year, because there were some pretty incredible, like, moments from horror films this year, both in movies and in TV. But this part is going to be pretty spoiler heavy. So if you haven't seen the movies that we're discussing, you might want to skip ahead. In the show notes, we'll put the timestamp of when we stop talking about our favorite moments from each movie. So you guys will know where to skip ahead to.
First one up for me is like the moment that we start talking about favorite moments is the one that has been seared in my head this entire time. And that was from Fear Street, 1994. And of course, if you've seen that movie, you already know what I'm talking about, and that is the bread cutter machine.
Oh my God.
Talk about a gasp moment, because the whole movie sets up like it feels like they're invincible at this point, and then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose in the finale, and someone goes to the bread cutter, and I was aghast that happened.
I was too, because it's like, again, you thought all the characters were safe, and then all of a sudden, like, they're massacred, and it's like, holy shit. And then just like the creativity of the bread cutter, Like, it's so obvious, but I'd never thought about it. And just watching her head turn into mincemeat.
Great practical effect.
Great practical effect. Yeah, that was fucking terrible. And, like, she was a big character.
Mm-hmm.
So that was incredible. Good God. And, like, I think it's just a testament to, like, those movies were not fucking around. Lee Janiak was not fucking around.
No.
So next up is, of course, the jail scene in Malignant.
That moment. I mean, we'll probably talk about this later a lot in more in depth, but that moment was like my hat's off to you.
He just fucking whips the chairs around.
I know. Pings the cops as they're trying to run away.
God,
like it's just
so good.
That whole sequence is just a perfectly executed moment of action.
It's incredible. I know, and we probably will talk about it more, but that just is such a good moment. The next one I want to talk about is from We Need to Do Something. This is like the one big jump scare.
I'm a good boy.
Oh, fuck off. Rude. But yes, the I'm a good boy scene where they're like, they dumbasses stick their arms out of the door because there's a dog.
Like, hello.
Like, what the fuck? And, you know, the dog, they can't see the dog, but it feels like a dog and it's licking their hands and they're going, who's the good boy? Who's the good boy? And then all of a sudden, that booming voice goes, I'm a good boy. And it's fucking Ozzy Osbourne, which is wild as fuck. But yeah, that part is disgusting and incredible. I mean, I wasn't like the biggest fan of the entire movie, but that was a really good moment.
That moment was the moment.
Yeah, it was
absolutely
incredible.
I like gasped at that point. I was like, what? I was really expecting like the hand to be bit or something like that. Because I'm like, you're sticking your hand out. No one's eating out there. Maybe like he's a rabid dog. You don't know what kind of dog is out there.
Exactly. I was like waiting for her arm to
And then the fact that it talks.
Oh my God.
No, not here for that. Not here for that. So the other one, another one is the scene, it's from Saint Maud, and it is the last half a second.
I know.
Of Saint Maud in particular, where, and again, we'll probably talk about this later, but she ends up like, you end up seeing what's really happening to her at the very end, and she is just burning in like a half second, like, oh fuck moment.
We will talk about it later, but Jesus Christ, like talk about like an incredible ending, like second and a half. Jesus. Of course, okay, The Empty Man. We are considering this a 2021 release, everybody. Like, it's a 2021 release, just so everyone knows. There's a scene where there is a giant group of kids just, like, running around a fire in the weirdest possible moment, and the main character goes, fuck that, and turns around, and they all start chasing him, and it's just so incredible. Like, his awareness of the situation, and then just, like, the ridiculously weird cosmic horror-ness of these people just, like, running around a fire and the fire shooting up into the air. It's just, it all comes together to create an incredible, incredible sequence of just what the fuckery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The next one is from Caveat, a movie that I ended up watching this weekend because you had talked about it. And all I knew from you was that there's one scene that had you like gasp. And so I'm watching this movie and I'm prepared. And then there is a moment where there is a dead body in a cellar and it just keeps staring at the main character and he puts his hat over it. And all of a sudden he looks back at it and there is a hole in the hat and that eyeball is fucking looking through it. And I was watching with my roommate Cass and we both went, oh, fuck no.
Right? And, like, honorable mention to when he looks down and, like, her fucking head pops up for a second, like, and it's just like, and she's got a creepy little smile, and you're like, I was like, no.
I thought that was the moment because, like, I went, oh, shit. And then, like, I was like, was that the moment? Because that was kind of terrifying. And then, no.
Like, those two kind of go hand in hand because they're pretty close apart, but with the eye was absolutely, like, shit my pants. Like, what in the fuck is happening? Because that whole movie is just so creepy, but that part is just like, nope, absolutely not. And then the last movie moment, we have here is, I thought this was incredible, the Wendigo reveal in Antlers. I'm still a little bit mixed on Antlers, but when they show the Wendigo for the first time, like the full Wendigo, and it's got like the human skin face on it, I was just like, this is fucking disgusting. And I was,
gnarly.
It was a really good reveal of the monster. I wish there was more of the monster in it, but it was a great creature reveal with like the nasty skin, and like, it's like, why it had like, it was like ritual, not as good as the ritual, but like that vibe of it, of like that reveal of the monster, and like, what is that kind of situation? So just wanted to give a shout out to the creature reveal in that, because it was, mwah.
It was so good.
So good.
So then we have just a couple, we'll run through them really quickly, TV moments, because there was some really good genre TV this year. And it started out the beginning of this year with a moment from Servant, a moment that was filmed, directed by Julia Ducournau, in which our main male character, who has been having sense deprivation in his hands, and he's a chef, and he's like, he basically has COVID. He can't smell, he can't taste, he can't feel things with his hand, and he gets himself wounded at the end of season 1. And in season 2, there's a moment where he is taking his bandage off, and the wound is just pussy, and it is oopy goopy, and it shows the strength of Julia Ducournau's framing, and it was just like this moment of what? So gross. So gross.
I haven't watched it, but I'm excited.
If y'all haven't watched Servant, get yourself catch up, because season 3 is coming out and it's gonna be good.
I'm excited. I need to catch up. I do need to catch up. The next one is the Mother Needle Drop in Yellowjackets, episode 2.
Yeah, in which Misty takes that axe and
just
goes ham on Coach Scott's leg.
It's an incredible moment when she just like she's like, no fucking hesitation. It's just like, all right, bitch, and just chops the leg off, and the blood spurts on her face. Like, oh my God. That show really uses its like soundtrack really well. But in that moment specifically, paired with like the song, paired with just like the violence and the realization that Misty is in fact quite unhinged.
Right. So yeah, the she's like, help me move him, and then she like, after she chops him off, and then they're staring at her with like she's like lost her mind, and then the lyric is, I'm losing my mind, everything's fine, and then it goes to the Yellowjackets title, and it's just like, perfect. It's
perfect.
And the final one is from Midnight Mass, and that there's a lot of moments that were really good in that, but for me the one that stood out was the whole church scene where it's like everything just goes to shit.
Oh my God. Everyone is turned into a vampire, and it's just a fucking massacre.
A blood orgy, yeah.
Like, I thought I knew where that show was going. I did not. Ugh, and then when who does it fucking tackle out of was it, because there's like the vampire who just like fucking tackles someone out the door, and it's just, on top of that, everything else, and it's just like, whew, it's all going to hell. It's hell in a handbasket, basically. But yes, that is an incredible. And then that tire, like, there are so many other moments, like that one monologue that Kate Siegel gives about like death and stuff that like rendered me useless. But that's not really scary. That's just an incredible moment of acting.
We also saw a bunch of festival favorites or festival films this year. And so we did this last year, and we were kind of thinking about tossing out some of the ones that we really liked that we definitely think you should keep an eye on in 2022, hopefully, when they will hopefully get releases.
Yes.
So the first one for me, and I think this probably is shared between both of us, is The Sadness.
Yes.
We talked to Rob Javaz on the podcast, and that is a movie I think is going to be very divisive among people. Mm-hmm. And it definitely leans into that extreme horror aspect in a variety of ways. You're talking so many trigger warnings, so many content warnings, just all the warnings. And it won't be everyone's cup of tea, but man, is it just a piece of gnarly, bleak nihilism that has probably the most blood I've seen in the movie in a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And yeah, it's incredible because it's extreme horror, but it doesn't feel like it's just trying to shock you. Like, it's really fascinating how he strikes this weird balance between like fucking you up, but also it doesn't feel completely purposeless. Like, it feels there's a meaning behind it, I guess. I don't know. That sounds like pretentious, but it doesn't feel like as exploitative as extreme horror can be.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating. And again, I don't think everyone will like it, but I was fucking surprised by, one, how gnarly it was, but two, how much I loved it for how gnarly it was. Another one I'm really excited for is we are all going to the World's Fair.
Yep.
That is one I'm really excited to come out. We both saw it at Sundance. It's been almost a year since we both saw it.
Oh, Jesus, it has.
Yeah, I know. And so I'm so excited for people to get to see this movie. I know it's been at a lot of festivals and a lot of people have been able to see it during its festival run, but I can't wait for everyone to have access to it because it is such a fucking good movie. It's hard to even describe, like, talking about that movie, but it just, like, is such a, especially because, like, it kind of captures my kind of, like, generation, maybe, like, a little bit younger than me, and, like, our relationship to the internet, and how young we were, and how young we are, like, I was on the internet, and, like, what those weird relationships we formed looked like, and... But it also captures this, like, really fascinating stuff about, like, transness and, like, identity. And it's just found footagey and second screen horror. And it just is a beautiful look at loneliness in the digital age, but also the dangers of the digital age and, like, the kind of predatory, weird shit that can go on. And you're unaware of it.
And the way that, like, creepypastas, the stories kind of propagate and kind of change based on who's telling the story and kind of whose story it ultimately ends up being. Like, there's a lot of really interesting identity aspects with that in terms of storytelling with creepypastas. And as someone that didn't know anything about creepypastas until I watched Channel Zero and learned that was a whole thing and heard, like, stories about the Slender Man, it was an experience to watch for me. Yeah. Another one, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be on both of our lists, is Hellbender.
Yes.
Which surprised the fuck out of me because it's by the Addams Family, which is a trio, a quartet?
Yeah, it's a mom, dad, and their daughter.
And they make movies. And the last one I didn't really care for. The Deeper You Dig was not my thing, but a lot of people really liked it,
including me.
Yeah, including you. But Hellbender just was ticking every single box that I loved, and I'm really excited for that one to come out. I think it's hitting Shudder at some point in the early parts of 2022. So yeah, I believe. I think no concreteness, but I think that's when it's coming out.
I think so too. And then the last one that I can think of right now, because my brain is fried and I I'm having trouble remembering when things came out, and also I didn't go a lot of festivals this year because life was a little bit crazy. But one I am excited for that I just watched that is I don't know if I'm hoping it's coming out in 2022. It's called The Outwaters. It's this weird found footage movie that's a weird cosmic horror, gory ass found footage movie that is debuting at a festival in February. And I don't know if it's going to get a full run, what's going to happen with it, but found footage people, keep your eyes out. It's fucking weird. But it's pretty cool. A little bit. It drags a little bit at some points, but it's honestly one of the more fucked up found footage movies I've ever seen. So keep an eye out for that. And I'll
saying a lot.
Probably be one of those people posting about it constantly on the internet. So get ready for that, everybody.
And then my last one is Keeping Company, which I don't think you have seen, but it's one that I'm hoping that we'll get to talk with the writer of some point in 2022. And it's I talked about it on the podcast once, where it's two insurance salesmen and they end up knocking on the wrong door and end up getting trapped inside a serial killer's basement. And it's a vicious satire of capitalism and corporate culture. And it also kind of takes the sort of Norman Bates Psycho narrative in a way and sort of tweaks it a bit. And it's viciously funny. I thought it was really good. I saw it at Panic Fest this year. And I haven't stopped thinking about it ever since, because I love dark comedies. I love satires. And this one is just pitch black, vicious satire of corporate culture.
I'm so excited. I remember you talked about that a while ago, and I was like, this sounds very
long
good.
Time ago. Yeah. Beginning of the decade, it feels like. But there's also some big movies coming out in 2022. And I have a theory that 2022 is going to be another 2019.
Oh, really? Tell me more about this.
Because we're getting Nope by Jordan
That's
Peele.
Fucking right. I totally forgot we were getting Nope this year.
Disappointment Boulevard by Ari Aster. and The Northman by Robert Eggers. And in 2019, what did we get? We got each one of their second films. And now we're getting each one of their third films in 2022.
Oh my God.
Year. Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
And we also get Scream.
Scream 5. Absolutely. Here for that.
And then the new Halloween. Is the new Halloween movie coming out next year too?
Yeah. The new Halloween's coming out next year.
Who knows what that's going to be like. But still curious about it.
I've heard really good things about The Black Phone, and that's coming out next year.
I'm very excited.
That recently got pushed back.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because people are saying that they think that it means that it has a better chance in the summer because it's going to now be like a big summer horror release. So that'll be very interesting. I'm excited to see Ethan Hawke as another creep. Like, he looks really fucking creepy in that movie.
Oh, that mask.
Mm-hmm. And then, it's like horror adjacent, but Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, the new A24 movie. I know it's like not exactly horror, but it's got like that sci-fi vibe to it. So I'm really excited for that one.
I'm excited for that for sure. And we also getting, from the team that did The Night House this year, we're getting a new Hellraiser with Jamie Clayton, a trans woman, as Pinhead.
I'm so excited. Oh my God.
Like, fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. And like, if you watch The Night House, you can see where David Bruckner is going, basically. And it's cool as fuck. Oh God, and we also have Orphan First Kill. We have the Orphan prequel coming out.
Evil Dead Rises.
Oh my God, Jesus me. It is going to be a banner year in horror, huh?
Which was directed by the director of The Hole in the Ground. Is that what it was called?
Yes, The Hole in the Ground. Oh, and then the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is coming to Netflix, which might not be good.
Yeah, but I'm a little iffy about that. But we'll see.
But I'm still, I'm excited to give it a try. But it's, again, I wanted to mention it because it's a big title, and they're rebooting it, so there's, like, so many big releases happening, and I feel like we're going to get a bunch of our favorite little stuff, too. It's like, oh my God.
One final one is Prey, the Predator prequel.
Oh, I fucking... There's so many things happening! I wonder how many are going to get pushed back. I hope none of them get pushed back. But everything,
Omicron.
I know, everything is so shitty right now. Like, who knows? And then I'm excited for Sundance this year because I know we're both covering it, and there's some weird shit that looks like is going to be playing there in the best way. I mean that. So I'm excited for new weird festival stuff this year too.
Yeah, I'm really excited because when we talked to Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, they said that they had made a small little movie in between, after directing the last Synchronic, and then also before that, they talked about filming this little movie after Synchronic and before they were going to tackle Moon Knight for Disney Plus, and that's coming to Sundance, and I'm super excited. There's something in the dirt, and I'm really excited.
And like it's gonna it looks like it's gonna kind of like harken back to like Resolution and The Endless and Spring. So I'm very excited to see them kind of hopefully go back a little bit more to their DIY mumblegore roots a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shit coming out. It's very exciting.
I'm really excited for next year.
Yeah.
If all these movies hold to their release dates, I'm really excited for next year.
Me too. Okay. So we are now at the worst part of this. Just kidding. The best of the year. But we want to start off, I think, giving some shout outs to some honorable mentions that didn't make our full list. Because I definitely had a top 20, and having a top 10 was very hard to narrow down. And so there are a couple that I do want to give a little love to.
Yeah, like I said when I was talking earlier about my personal list, is that like I had an easy top 20, like you just said, because there's a lot of movies that came out this year, and a lot of really good movies that came out this year, and so it was really hard narrowing down, like leaving some of these off of my list, to be perfectly honest. But
yeah. I think I'm just gonna list mine just so I don't like take up too much time.
Right.
Because I could talk forever about them because they're all really good. So first honorable mention is The Night House. It like just barely didn't make my top 10. Like it's definitely top 20. It's an incredible film. I think there were a couple things that were like a little like brought it down a couple notches for me, but it's an incredibly made film, and like David Bruckner knows what the fuck he's doing, and I'm very excited. Just like we said, what he does with Hellraiser after what like the weird shit that you kind of see in The Night House. Psycho Goreman, again, just missed it. It's so much fun. It's great. Honeydew, nasty, weird cannibal movie that is just like a fucking surreal nightmare.
Go listen to our episode.
Yep. Werewolves Within, again, great horror comedy. It was very fun. The Curse of Professor Sardonicus, which is this found footage movie that is it's like kind of flew under the radar, but it's very good. So if you like found footage, give that movie a try. It's very fun. And then last one, Censor from Prono Bailey Bond.
Yeah, that one is also on mine. Like a couple of the ones you've talked about were definitely on mine. Censor was for sure in it just barely missed that cut.
Yeah.
Also for me, the Fear Street collection, I'm just going to group them together. Because those three movies, they were an event, and it was really nice to see the horror community sort of like have a weekly thing to look forward to in the dead of the summer when pandemic was blah. And so it was really nice to have that. And I thought they're really well-made movies. I really liked them.
They're so good.
You mentioned Censor. The Medium was almost on my list.
We'll talk about it. Don't worry.
Yeah, I figured we would. I really liked it. So I'll save that for later. Slacks, which is another kind of comedy, kind of satire, vicious satire of corporate culture and corporate wokeness. We talked to the director of that on the podcast.
Listen to our episode about that one.
Really enjoyed that one a lot. If you ever want to see Pants dance to Bollywood music,
it's fucking
just great.
Incredible.
Slumber Party Massacre almost made it on my list as well. I loved it. I thought that was the great way to do a remake of a movie that might have been trying to be, progressive, but didn't completely work. And then the final one for me is one that I had on my list and I took it off because the more I started writing my notes about it, it kind of soured on it, but it was Wrong Turn.
Oh, yeah, that's so funny. I was thinking about that one too for my list, but we
watched all 6 of the the Wrong Turn movies, and if you had told me that the 7th movie / reboot of the whole series would be anywhere near my top 10 list, I would have laughed in your fucking face. But here we are. I have some problems with some of the way it handled queer characters and some of the things it was doing with that. And so that's why I took it off my list, because it ultimately kind of angered me as I was writing about it. But I think it's a very well-made movie.
Yes.
But that's mine.
Cool. Oh God, one last one. I'm so sorry. The Strings. It literally almost cracked my list. So we'll talk about it, I guess. But yeah, it almost cracked my list. 10's such a hard number.
I know.
Beat a baby.
All right. Now it's time. For better or for worse.
It's just time.
To talk about our top 10 of 2021. So why don't you hit it off, Mary Beth? What is your number 10?
Fine, Terry. So my number 10 is My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. I talked about this on Little Cuts. I just watched it last week. And I can't stop thinking about it. And so it's earning number 10 on my list. It knocked down a couple movies that I thought were going to be in my top 10, but like dark horse, last minute film sneaking up all up in here with, we all know I love a vampire. Mm-hmm. So this is a vampire movie that's not a vampire movie, which I love. It is so deeply sad, but so incredibly well done. Patrick Fugit's performance is just breathtaking. And the final shot of him at the end is just like, mwah, so good, like so devastating and incredible, like just look, and like he, in the entire film really is how he uses his facial expressions to convey so much pain and regret and confusion, and it is just so beautifully heartbreaking. So
his performance is it's a powerhouse performance.
It's a powerhouse performance. And I just, I'm a sucker for a sad horror movie too, and it's got vampires, it's got great performances. Like honestly, I couldn't not include it. So that is my number 10. Terry, What about you?
My number 10s have kind of been dark horse movies that I don't necessarily hear people talk about, but really like affected me, or ones that kind of surprised me. And honestly, as we're going through my list, surprise is probably going to be a word I'm going to use a lot. So here's a fun game, listeners. Take a shot whenever I say surprise, because it's been a year of surprises. And New Order starts it off at 10. I talked about this one on Little Cuts 27 way back in May.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen many people talk about it.
I forgot about that movie.
Have you? Did you see it? End up seeing it?
No, I didn't end up seeing it because I fucking forgot about it. I'm sorry. My brain.
It hasn't left my mind ever since I saw it. And I said in my review of New Order that New Order shows humanity at its absolute worst and then somehow descends further. There's no room for empathy or kindness in the world that filmmaker Michel Franco creates, and those that try to break free of apathy are severely punished. And very briefly, it's about a coup in Mexico where the poor rise up and destroy the rich in a lot of ways. And then a military kind of coup sets in to like create a military order. And the story focuses on a rich family, their servants, and people kind of tangentially related to the family. When it came out, people compared it to Parasite, and that it tackles kind of systemic and cyclical issues of kind of class disparity and how out of touch the rich ruling class is. But it's incredibly violent, and Franco is more interested in showing us rather than telling us how to feel about what's happening.
Okay.
And so it focuses on this rich woman, and we see the events through her eyes, but it doesn't necessarily show sympathy for the rich.
Okay.
It doesn't really show sympathy for many people. It just sort of creates this is something that could potentially happen, and this is what will happen because of that. It presents the coup, the military response, and the violence, and it's harrowing. It comes with a whole lot of severe sexual assault trigger warnings and content warnings on it. And it's a movie I haven't rewatched because it left such an indelible mark on me that I don't know if I can ever watch it again. But in terms of like bleak nihilism and movies that I don't think people necessarily would consider a horror movie, although I do, this is my number 10.
Fuck yeah. Need to watch that.
Number 9.
Okay. My number 9 is The Feast.
Oh, yeah.
Directed by...
Oh, I forgot about that.
Directed by Lee Haven-Jones. This is the film that is all in Welsh, and it takes place on this beautiful farm in Wales, and it's a rich family having a dinner party, and they have a young woman from the village come and help them serve the dinner. And there's something really weird about her, and she's like, something seems off. Like, she's very quiet. Whenever she walks somewhere, there's like dirt, but even though she hasn't been outside, and it just culminates in this like incredibly violent climax that I was not expecting, but I fucking loved it. Like, I don't know if I should spoil why I loved it.
Yeah.
Should I spoil it?
Yeah.
Okay. So it ends up... Fuck, it's so fucking good. It ends up that because these people have been kind of digging into the ground to find like natural resources and things, like it's, it's one of those narratives where the rich people are coming in to mine the earth and they find something they don't want to find, and they wake up this fucking angry female spirit who is like, how fucking dare you? So she grabs the first body she can find, which is this young woman named Caddy, played by Anne Elwey, I think her name is. And Caddy becomes a vessel for this vengeful-ass spirit who the entire movie is just plotting the destruction of this whole family. And then when she gets it, holy shit. It is, like, for me, like, such good for her cinema. And she just, like, oh, it's incredible. And very eco-horror. And I thought it was going to be cannibalism because I was like, The Feast, that shit.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And it is incredible. So I absolutely loved it. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about how it uses this voyeurism to really build up this tension of like class disparity and like observing others. And it's so nasty. And I just absolutely adored it. So that is my number 9.
I completely forgot about that movie, honestly, when I was making this list, because it is really good. And I love the way that, she inhabits this body of a person that is going to be ignored by the rich. And yet she's sitting there and plotting. And the thing that you think that she's being a servant for, no, she is analyzing everyone. She's finding out their weaknesses. And then she exploits them in the same way that they exploited her as Mother Nature. And you're right. It's so good.
It's so good.
It's so good and gnarly.
Okay, what about you? What's your number 9?
So my number 9 is The Strings.
Oh, okay.
A couple movies could have taken the spot for this. The Medium almost did because of the epic way it was shot, and it kind of played the way it played with found footage, kind of tropes and aesthetics. I love that. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this little film that I watched in last October, I've thought so much about since then. And in a lot of ways, it's the inverse of a lot of movies on my list because it's very quiet. It's very contemplative. It's subtle in its scares. And the story unfolds is more quietly haunting and disturbing than brash. But what I love about it, and one of the things that really kind of I keyed in on when I was rewatching it a few weeks ago for the podcast, is that it's kind of a love letter to indie filmmaking. And it's based on what can be accomplished with small resources and large talent. And when we talked to Ryan Glover, the thing that kind of shocked me was that one of my favorite sequences came about because of budget limitations. And there's this whole scene where, she sees someone in her house and then the camera pops to outside and it's watching the house as you see the flashlight moving through the house. And it was a budgetary issue that they couldn't film her running through the house and they wanted to do that. So they just kind of pulled it on the outside. And it's my favorite moment of the film. And that's what I love about independent filmmaking, those happy accidents that end up making a film an experience. And I had to have The Strings on my list because of that.
Yeah, God, I feel so sad that I didn't have it on mine because it is such an incredibly beautiful, haunting movie.
Mm-hmm.
So
cosmic horror. I loved every moment of it.
Now I'm regretting my list.
That's the way I felt when you said Feast. I was like, oh shit.
I know, but everyone watch The Strings on Shudder. It is like, God, and like I'm getting cold just thinking about it, just because it's such a freezing cold movie. Oh, God.
It really is.
But it is such an ode to indie filmmaking and what you can accomplish with so little resources. Like. And I've got a couple on here that make me think about that too, but like I feel like this year, and the pandemic in general, but this year too, I think there's been so many movies that have shown that like you can make a fucking good horror movie with so little money, which is both great and terrible, because I think a lot of studios are like, oh, you can make a horror movie for nothing, which is not necessarily true. But I think there's something to be said about the resourcefulness of filmmakers and like what they're willing to do to get their foot in the door and why they deserve more money. This shouldn't be used as an excuse like, oh, you can make a horror movie for nothing, but like look at the resourcefulness of these people and think about what they can be fucking doing when you have the money. And like that to me is an incredible testament to the genre and what people can do and just like the myriad and like endless possibilities for stories. Like, yeah, there's a lot of reboots happening, but there's so many cool original stories happening. And it just makes me really emotional and happy and like in awe of the talent that is out there that is just like waiting to be discovered.
Yeah.
I'll get off my soapbox now.
Absolutely. That's why that's my number 9 on my list.
Damn it,
for sure.
I should have put this.
That's all why.
Fuck. Okay. Fuck.
All right. Number 8. What's up next, Mary Beth?
Malignant.
Oh.
Is my number 8. I know. I was thinking about putting it higher, but there's like the way that I was really like rating these movies for me, it was like, it sounds like so like instinct and like how they stuck with me and how they made me feel. And a lot of the movies that are ahead of this one, like I had a really intense, like deeply emotional reaction to. And like, that's kind of what I'm basing it off of. And Malignant, I had an emotional reaction to, but it was mostly like absolute, like, joy, which is very important. Like, not a lot of horror movies can evoke as much joy as Malignant gave me. And I know it's on your list, and I know it's probably higher up than this, obviously.
It's not on my list at all.
What?
It's not on my list.
It's not?
No.
You're fucking with me, right?
No, it's not on my list.
You're fucking with me. Anyway, you're fucking with me. I know you are. It's James Wan given, I always say this, it's James Wan given an Amex Black card and said, Daddy, look, I made Aquaman. Give me everything I want. Let me make the movie I want. And like, we talk about this in an episode that hasn't come out yet. And I won't say anything, but Malignant is what Dead Silence wanted to be in terms of budget and studio support. in terms of something that's batshit. But Malignant, again, is even better because Juan has had a lot of time to kind of develop his style. But just, we'll talk about it probably more with you, but just the twists and the turns and just the unabashed crazy bullshit. I love it. Like, this is the movie we needed in 2021. You know what I mean? Like, this is the absolute crazy movie that we needed to watch to bring us all together to be like, this is why we love horror movies, and this is like the kind of gonzo shit that we all love. Like, I love movies that are about grief and shit, but this movie was just all out about being like bonkers. And honestly, I needed it. I know we all did. So that's my number 8.
It was fine.
I hate you. Fuck off. What's your number 8? Well, if it's Malignant, I'm gonna fucking cry.
No, my number 8 is another film that surprised me because it is a Neo Giallo set in a movie theater in 1993 with a villain who pickles and consumes eyeballs. Oh, and it's Uruguayan. It's called The Last Matinee, and this movie is drenched in atmosphere. It opens up with this opening tracking shot over an industrial town. It's like crossing a bay and over this town, following this car that ends up pulling in front of this movie theater, and the rain is just pouring down. The car, you see the driver, and he is eating something pickled in his car. And he has this black rain slicker, and he just is idling in his car waiting for the movie to start. The theater is gorgeous. It has these gorgeous marble stairs, its cavernous auditorium, and those kind of red seats from the 1990s that I remember so fondly, like just filled with nostalgia. Its premise is very simple. It's the last film of the evening. Theater is showing a B-grade horror movie, and the small audience is kind of spread throughout this huge auditorium doing what people at B-grade horror movies do. There's like people on first dates. There's people making out. There's kids that kind of snuck in to the R-rated film. And there's the usher that's walking through, and there's the projectionist that has taken over for her father, and she's kind of closing the last night. And the killer kind of flits to the auditorium, killing people and taking their eyes with the express purpose of pickling them so that he can eat them later as little snackies.
Protein balls.
Yeah. Oh,
ooh, do you think it's like a protein bar or like a cherry tomato?
Oh, God.
Sorry. It's fucking gross. I'm upset with myself for saying that.
I'm about ready to throw up in my mouth.
Heart juice.
Oh, and the way they squish. Oh, yeah, just like a cherry. Well, I'm never going to look at cherries again. Thanks a lot, Mary Beth. But it's gory and it's suspenseful, and the villain is gnarly, and it has enough eye torture to make Fulci proud. And I love that this is a Uruguayan take on a Neo Giallo, and it understands the kind of tropes and the kind of framing and the kind of characters that are in like Giallo films. And I love it. I think it's fan-fucking-tastic. And yeah, it's great.
I didn't have a chance to watch it, and I'm so bummed. But I've heard amazing things. I'm excited to see it because it looks incredible.
He pickles and eats eyeballs.
Yeah, well, that gets me alone. Like, you pickle and eat eyeballs. Duh. But, like, I love it when Giallos have those kinds of killers that are just like, what the fuck? But you're like, I love that because it's, like, so ridiculous. And you're like, but that's what Giallo is. It's fucking ridiculous. Like, it's not supposed to really make sense. Like, when we did the Giallo series, like, none of those movies made sense. None of them. Like, if you thought about them too hard, you were like, this falls apart. But that's not the point. Pickles eyeballs and eats them.
As you do.
As you do.
And what I love about that little detail is that there's no really explanation for it.
No.
There's no backstory. No. There's none of that. It's what he does. It's what he does.
Exactly.
And more power to him.
More power to good for you.
Just don't take mine, please.
Please. I need them. I would like to keep my eyeballs.
But yes, so that was my number 8. Number 7.
Number 7 for me is VHS 94.
Yep.
Is that your number 7?
No.
Okay.
It should have been on my list.
Oh, it's not. Okay. I've talked about this a bunch. We talked to Jennifer Frieder about Carrie. Listen to that episode. There's going to be a lot of plugging of our episodes on this episode. But, I mean, this is an incredible, like entry into a franchise that had kind of staled a little bit. This was also the first entry that had women directors, which is baffling, but you know what? We'll have it. Ratma took the world by storm.
Hail Ratma!
Hail Ratma! And then we had we just had like a bunch of like crazy. We had the Timo segment that was all about like the kind of like Frankenstein narrative. There was the really cool single location Wake segment that Simon Barrett did, and then there was like the extremist vampire one, which was a little bit weird, but it was kind of cool at the same time, but it's like a weird message. But I think they just had such a great variety of filmmakers. I think they really had people that thought outside of the box and made these incredible short found footage things. I mean, obviously it's found footage and I love that, and it was really cool to see how found footage was used in different ways. The frame narrative, you know, wasn't the strongest part. We talked to Jennifer Reeder about that, but still had some really interesting things to say about, like, you know, viewership and kind of reclaiming these kinds of things. So it's on my list. I loved it so much. Hail Ratma. I mean, come the fuck on. Ratma. King shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kicking myself for not including it on my list either, because it was a genuine surprise for me. And especially because, like, I mean, I watched the first one, I enjoyed it. I watched the second one, I thought, okay, there's a couple of here that I like. And then I just sort of lost track of that series. And I had very low expectations going into this one. But it did some really cool shit. And I love that Jennifer Reeder and Chloe Okono were involved. I think Chloe turns out the best of the skits of the segments. I loved it. I love that movie.
I do too. It was
really good.
It's great. So yeah, that's my number 7. What about you?
So my number 7 kind of shocked me because it's one of the funnier movies I saw this year, and it is hands down the best video game adaptation. And no, I'm not talking about Resident Evil, which was funny for a completely different reason. No, it's Josh Rubin's Werewolves Within, a movie that takes the whodunit subgenre of thrillers, adds a splash of supernatural horror, and a whole lot of silliness. The characters are kind of caricatures, but that's kind of the point. They're living in a small mountain town where a businessman wants to build a pipeline, and the residents are divided across party lines. But the cast is just so stacked with so many fantastic character actors and comedians. Sam Richardson. Then we have Michaela Watkins. We have Cheyenne Jackson, Harvey Guillen, Glenn Fleshler, and more. But the heart of the movie belongs to Milana Weintraub, who a lot of people know as Lily from the AT&T commercials, but she's a sketch actress. She's been in like a bunch of like really cool like comedy shorts. She is absolutely hilarious in this, anchors the film, and I love that the film kind of skewers the kind of cool girl syndrome and subverts expectations in absolutely fantastic ways with that character, in particular with her relationship with Sam Richardson's character. I've watched this movie probably the most of any movie on my list this year, and I think it will keep being in my rotation for years to come because while I do love creeping dread, slow burn, depressing movies, we've gotten so many of those over the last 4 or 5 years. I'm ready for some fun horror movies.
Fuck off, read me, she might know it's you.
I love them, and I feel like we've gotten so many of them over the last few years that I'm like, I want something fun. I want something to make me laugh, to kind of bring joy back, because it's just been a very depressing couple of years, and I would really like some more funny movies, or movies that are entertaining in that regard and not just trying to like gut punch you over and over and over again, which again, there's a lot of those on this list. There's a lot of them that I've loved, but I'm ready for some humor, and Werewolves and then kind of punches that ticket. And
it's so good. It's a really fun movie, and it's so funny and gross, and it's a really good balance of funny and horror. It's incredible.
And I'm surprised that we haven't had more kind of werewolf whodunit. We talked about with Josh Rubin on the show. Again, we've had a lot of guests on the show, but it's on our list.
Look, we like these movies, and we have them come on because we want to talk to them and want to promote their movies.
That's why we have them on the list. So that shouldn't come as a surprise. We're not like just going, ooh, what would be a good movie to know? We want to talk to these fuckers. And that just kind of came out of my mouth.
That's incredible. I want that just like as my ringtone. We want to talk to these fuckers. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but
your soul,
it's true.
Your heart. You care.
It did.
You care.
That was like
such an incredible reaction.
But yeah, so that's my number 7, Werewolves Within. I thought it was deeply funny and enjoyable and best video game adaptation I've ever seen.
Yeah, I keep forgetting it's a video game. So random, but great.
So random. All right. Okay. Number 6.
So my number 6 is Satyr.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The realization dawning over you that was a 2021 movie. Yeah, I know. I almost forgot too. Satyr is a movie that I have not been able to stop thinking about. It is this incredible blend of quiet narrative filmmaking and found footage, but actually footage that Jordan Graham, the director, found, and recordings of his grandmother and the writings that she used to do when it was like spirit writing, but it might not have actually been spirit writing. And there can be some weird kind of things with like agency and consent in this movie, I think is important to kind of mention with how he used some of this work. So I just wanted to, I love this movie, but wanted to bring that up because I think it's important to just remember with it. But this movie is haunting, and like it has haunted me since I saw it, and I absolutely adore it. And I think that people really need to see it and just experience this beautifully terrible world that's created. And it's just like, and like the imagery towards the end gets progressively more haunting, and it just is like the epitome of dread. And it's beautifully shot, and there's like no dialogue in it, basically none, and it's all just a lot of emotions and a lot of just anxieties and these interesting family dynamics and this kind of puzzle that comes together in a really interesting way where you're not quite sure if it's supernatural or not, but it does give you a pretty satisfying conclusion, like to give you a pretty like satisfying kind of answer as to what is happening. And the final shot, this is the final shot when like in the living room when they're all sitting there, it's like, what in the shit is happening? It feels like the whole movie feels like a liminal space. It just feels like it's suspended in a weird kind of part of reality. And I love movies like that. And so, yeah, this movie is my number 6.
Yeah, talked earlier about kind of the spirit of independent filmmaking and working within your means and your budget. And yeah, this is another one that does that for sure. I'm glad you brought up the sort of weird, iffy way of using the found footage aspect of it, because it did kind of bother me a little bit, especially when he was on the show and we talked about it, and it kind of icked me out a little bit, but it definitely doesn't take away from how interesting and kind of powerful the movie is. It's a slow burn to end all slow burns, I will say. But no, I definitely can see why it would be on your list, particularly with the found footage aspect of it in such a realistic way. Like,
yeah, I wish
real
he
found
had
footage.
been a little bit more respectful of how he used it, but here we are.
Yep. And it's a good movie.
It's a great movie.
For sure.
Okay, what's your number 6?
So I saw my number 6 last year at Fantastic Fest 2020, and I've kind of quietly been gushing about it ever since then. It's The Boy Behind the Door.
Yeah!
A movie that not only features fantastic child actors, but brings to mind the kind of fantastic tension in Don't Breathe. Because it's about 2 young friends who are kidnapped on their way home one day, and they wake up inside of a trunk. One of the kids is taken from the trunk inside of a creepy house, and the other is left in the car, presumably to suffocate in the trunk. And he manages to escape, and he's thinking about freeing himself. He's actually walking down the path, and he hears his friend scream, and he can't. He has to go back and save him. And so he kind of creeps inside the house, and the majority of the movie is him trying to outwit his kidnappers and free his friend. And it's a very simple premise. It is literally, most of the movie is him sort of like in the Don't Breathe moment of trying to be quiet, trying to move around the kidnappers who don't think that he's there. This movie is about child trafficking, sex trafficking in a way, but it does manage to sidestep the sort of traditionally, I would say, like you would think of a man being in charge of that kind of thing. And then there's that kind of aspect of like queer predators. And this movie kind of sidesteps it. I also believe, in my opinion, that one of the main characters is queer coded. And I feel that it's more of his love for his friend that kind of pushes him onward. Of course, these are really young kids. These are, 13-year-olds. So they probably are just now figuring out their kind of sexuality at that time. But, it's anchored in two powerful performances with Lonnie Chavis and Ezra Dewey, two kid actors who these kids need to be in more stuff. They just put in amazing performances. It's intense throughout the entire film. It's not afraid of putting its two child actors in danger. This movie was co-written and co-directed by David Charbonnier and Justin Powell, who also debuted the Djinn this year from IFC Midnight. The Djinn is very similar to this movie in some regards, in that it's like a kid stuck in a single location trying to outwit something else. I think the Djinn is a really good feature. I think this movie is fantastic, though. I think The Boy Behind the Door is easily the better of the two films. They both starred Ezra Dewey, and I think these two films cement the filmmaking duo as ones to keep an eye on in the future. I think these are going to be people we're going to see most of, because they managed to crack out both of these films back to back, and it's amazing. I love this movie.
I still haven't seen it, but I loved the Djinn.
And this one's even better.
Yeah, so I'm excited.
It takes everything that worked in the Djinn and just sort of ups it.
Cool. Love to hear it.
Yeah, so that's my number 6, The Boy Behind the Door.
Okay.
Ooh, we are
halfway through.
We're at our top 5.
Top 5.
This is where things get interesting.
Okay. I'm pretty confident in my top 5, though. I will say.
All right.
I'm pretty confident in my top 5. Okay.
I am not.
So, my number 5 is The Wanting Mare.
Fuck.
I've done that to you so many times. I love it. Yeah. So, my number 5 is The Wanting Mare. This was something we saw on festivals in 2020.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Time is fake.
Yeah.
It is this absolutely incredible sci-fi epic that was made with like no money, and another testament to indie filmmaking, because Nicholas Ash Bateman has painstakingly created this world that is so beautiful, and it is sci-fi without being like robots and AI. It's more just like a future world where things are pretty fucked up from a climate perspective, but it's also not like really based in like what we know of the world now. Like, it's a completely made up society where there was maybe once magic, and what happens when that magic leaves the world. And it follows these three generations of women who have the same dream, and it's like kind of passed down as like almost like a curse. And it's how these women kind of deal with that curse and the relationships they make on top of that. And there is like a love story. It's a love story and a heartbreak, and like love between romantic love and platonic love and friendship love. And there's just, it is so beautifully constructed and written, and like it might be, it's a little confusing because it like you are thrown into the world of Witherin, which is what he calls it. But I was so enthralled with it, and like just was like fucking in it. Like, you are in it when you are in this movie. Like, you just, if you are like sold by it, you are in this world and you don't want to leave it, and you want more. And it's just like the most tender sci-fi film I've ever seen, in terms of how it deals with this idea of a different, like a fantasy. It's a fantasy too. It's like a fantasy sci-fi thing that is done in such a unique way. And I just absolutely adore this movie, and I can't champion it enough. Like, he was on the show, shocking to everybody. And I think he wants to make more in this universe, and I cannot fucking wait for him to make more in this universe, because it is such a cool, complex thing that you can tell he loves so much, and it just comes through with what he does in terms of like the acting and the framing and the way he makes this like CGI city look so real with so little money. And
yeah,
it's incredible. Again, like testament to indie filmmaking, man. Like Jesus, it's ridiculous.
That's the thing that stood out to me in particular is the way that I'm kind of harsh on a lot of blockbusters and a lot of the use of green screens and blue screens and LED screens and whatever screens they're using to like paint pictures behind there, because people don't understand perspective and people don't understand how to like make a 2D matte painting, which is basically what they're doing, except with computer graphics, look real. And it bothers me. It takes me out of movies all the fucking time. And yet this movie looks so good that there were times where I couldn't quite tell if we were really on a beach or if this was a creation that he had made. Mm-hmm. He does such great use of staging different perspectives to make it feel real. And I believed that this movie was real, and it is all done on a budget that paid for maybe 2 seconds of, the latest Avengers movie or the latest Marvel movie. That's amazing. And because of his work on here, he got to work on The Green Knight. He did the effects work on there as well. And you can see the quality that he's able to turn out on effects work. And this movie is a fantastic calling card. He kind of talked offline a little bit about some of his other ideas, and they all sound exciting set in this world. And I'm hoping that something gets made, because he is talented, and I'm hoping it doesn't take him almost a decade of making it. That he worked his ass off to get this film made, and this was a literal blood, sweat, and tears. And yeah, it's fantastic. I wish it was on my list because it's so good.
He's so good.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you?
All right. Going into this year, I assumed that this next film would be on my top 10 list. But I honestly thought it was going to be higher on my top 10 list.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And the only reason it's not is because I feel as if it has, I personally feel that it tackled a little too much. The movie is Candyman.
Oh, okay.
And it's one of those rare times where I wish a movie were longer, because at a slim 91 minutes, it's just not enough movie. Because this iteration of Candyman, directed by Nia DaCosta, tackles gentrification, police brutality, the systemic way that black people, particularly black men, are treated in society, the way in which urban legends are promulgated, but it's also a response to and a celebration of the 90s classic. The original, of course, was told by a white man, and this adaptation kind of seeks to reclaim that story through the hands of a black woman director. And there's a lot to take in. It doesn't always work because it does raise these points of interest, and I don't think it has the time or the bandwidth to really fully explore them. And so they end up feeling a little bit more like set dressing than a thematic device. Mm-hmm. And I didn't find it particularly scary. Yeah. Though it has one fantastically shot kill of this art critic where the camera is just pulling out. And it's like that you just see this kind of almost mirror image. And that is something that is what I love about this movie, though, is that I think that Nia DaCosta and her team understands what Candyman is about, and understands how to inverse the story through the use of mirrors. Because mirrors in this movie, mirrors in films, it's nothing new. But when you contrast this film with the original Candyman, it's almost like a reverse image of that film. Mm-hmm. I love the way that it kind of starts with this sort of like opening that references the original's opening. Because the original, there's like a tracking shot going over Cabrini Green and going over Chicago, whereas this one is centered more on the ground and focuses on the buildings. And the score by Robert Icke, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce that name. I'm sorry. Robert Icke Aubrey Lowe playfully subverts Philip Glass's masterful score. And the opening shot of just the mirrors and the way that the mirrors are utilized, it feels as if Nia DaCosta's Candyman welcomes you into this mirror world, and where the specter of Candyman is real flesh and blood, and it's not some whispered nightmare. Instead, it's a bloody refrain that continues to haunt America because it is America's trauma personified. And there's so much to love here. I had to have it on my list. I just wish it was a little further up, and it's because I think it tackles way too much, again, in a very slim 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's a great film.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. there's too many other stronger things. I'm so glad it happened, though, and I'm so glad that Nia DaCosta directed it, and I think it was really well made. And like you said, I think there was probably concessions that had to be made for a studio in terms of length, but it was really impressive what she was able to tackle in a big studio release like Candyman. Like, it's just like a testament to her ability as a filmmaker, especially because she hasn't done a lot of work. Like, she's did Little Woods, which is a much smaller scale drama about addiction and opiates. And I think she's a huge force to be reckoned with. And I think she did a really amazing job with what she was given. Like, she was given so much to work with and given like a huge story to kind of tackle. And she really put her spin on it. And it's incredible. So yeah, it's not on my list, but I agree that it is a really incredible reboot of a series that has needed a Black perspective, I think, on the story.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see what she's going to do next, because I think she still is attached to doing the Marvels for Marvel Studios, and I'm excited to see what she's going to do with that material. I hope that this isn't her last foray into sort of horror, because I feel that she kind of cut her teeth a bit on this one, and I'd love to see how she would progress as a horror director, because she has a very unique perspective. She has a very interesting visual taste. I don't think that actual horror element there is there as strongly as it could be. So I'm hoping that she gets another chance to do more horror and she doesn't get eaten up by the Marvel machine. That's my fear, honestly, with all of these small directors. I was thinking about it too with Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead going on to direct, the Moon Knight for Disney Plus. I'm like, that's great. And I'm really happy for them. And this is why you work hard to get, that sort of that like success and get recognized for it. But also at the other side of things, I don't want to see it eat them up and chew them out and spit them out, Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. So that's my number 5, Candyman.
Cool.
Had to be on my list. Wish it was a little higher, but
cool. Okay.
Number 4.
Number 4 for me is The Medium, which is the Thai found footage movie that Shudder put out this year. And of course, it's so high on my list because holy shit, this movie is incredible. Yes, it is very long, but did not feel as long as it is. It tackles shamanism and religious horror in such an incredible way. It's beautifully shot. Like the way that it's framed as a documentary crew making a documentary on shamanism in Thailand enables it to be beautifully shot. There isn't the kind of trappings of the shaky cam and kind of that whole thing, which we all know I defend that, but it's really cool to see this beautiful kind of cinematography of this village and of the scope of Thailand and kind of like understanding the scope of these religious practices. But then it becomes a possession movie and it gets it gets weird. It just gets so weird. Like, it's not just a regular possession movie where like, oh my God, she's crazy, but more like it's like a really interesting progression into it with this interesting kind of family trauma backgrounds about shamanism and who is supposed to inherit this spirit and like be her vessel and like all of this stuff. But then it gets even more into family trauma as the film goes on, and it gets more complicated and just uncomfortable in some of some of the implications about maybe incest and weird things like that. Like, this isn't a movie afraid to kind of get into taboo areas, but not exploit them. The producer was involved. Na Hong Jin did The Wailing, which was Yeah. So he did The Wailing, which is, it looks at South Korean shamanism and possession and exorcism. So The Medium does that. And its final act with its kind of version of the exorcism is, like, it's a lot, but it's incredible. But it's like, it does have that intricate kind of ritualistic. It's a ritual. It's like an incredibly complex ritual that involves a ton of people and a ton of steps, and a ton of care is given to those steps and showcasing these practices that aren't just an old sad priest throwing holy water on somebody. And I think it's a great use of the found footage techniques. I think it's beautiful to look at. I think it's just incredibly well done. And again, it uses its runtime really well. It doesn't feel like too long to me. So that's The Medium. That's my number 4 pick.
Yeah, I've watched this a couple weekends ago because Joe had been talking about it for a while, and then you saw it finally, and you started talking about it, raving about it. And I was like, okay, I'll sit down and I'll watch this. I was like, ooh, it's a little long, but
Fair.
It's epic. This movie is epic.
It is. It's a found footage epic.
It's epic in the same way that The Wailing is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't surprise me that the producer of this movie was involved with The Wailing. And, honestly, Mary Beth, since I started talking with you and started to look at found footage a little bit more, I started to look at kind of the structure a bit. And what I really liked about this particular film, it starts off as a documentary and it feels very open. And then it kind of turns into an almost like take on Paranormal Activity with cameras situated around a house, and it gets smaller. And then eventually it gets even more claustrophobic with the final scene being like sort of the handheld camera format that we typically see with a lot of found footage. And so the way it starts out like feeling very open, showing the mountains and showing the beauty of Thailand, and then eventually just gets narrower and narrower down to that final ritualistic ending. It's so well made, and it understands how to utilize found footage.
Mm-hmm. That's what I love. It understands how to utilize it to their advantage, and like what techniques work and what don't, and like how to use them strategically. Like you said, like the scope goes like smaller and smaller, and how they use like surveillance footage, and it's just like incredibly masterful. And I also want to shout out Sawani Utuma, who plays Nim, who is like who is the shaman, and she is like the best inversion of the Catholic priest kind of like religious figure. She is incredible in this movie. Like she is just a powerhouse in this film. So I wish she was in it the whole time. I think something pretty tragic happens to her in it, but I think that works for me though. In a way, you're just like, oh fuck, like we are not going to have a happy ending. Like
it's stakes. It's the stakes, and it escalates from there.
Yeah. So please watch this. It's on Shudder.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like though that we're seeing a lot of different, and we talked about this a couple times on the podcast already, that we're seeing a lot of different ways of which possession films are being told now, because we had like this year we had The Vigil, which could have easily been on my list.
Oh fuck, that was this year.
I know. I was just thinking about that. It literally just came in my head. The Vigil, which could have easily been on this list, or The Old Ways that came out this year that looked at it like the Bruja way of tackling possession, and then The Wailing from a few years ago. Like we're starting to see these kind of like supernatural possession films being told by something other than white Catholicism.
Yep.
And I think that's really good.
Yep.
Here for it.
Me too. All right. What's your number 4?
My number 4. So whenever I sit down to watch a movie, I want it to take me somewhere. I want it to show me things that I've not seen before. I want it to kind of whisk me away. And whether it's to a horrifying destination or to Vista Del Mar, I want to be so enveloped by the movie that I forget the outside world for an hour or two. And that's why The Empty Man kind of did it for me.
Oh.
From the 22-minute cold open that initially feels completely out of place, but that on secondary and tertiary watches starts to like make a lot more sense to the neo-noir drenched city where the majority of the film takes place, to the cultish paranoia, to tulpas, to urban legends, to the kind of ultimate cosmic horror of it all. The Empty Man had me in its thrall. It constantly surprised me. Take a shot, listeners. It's also a film that practically beds for that second, or third viewing, because I personally picked up a whole lot more. I sat down and rewatched it 2 weekends ago, and I was like, oh, I see how this movie is laying out, because that first part, I know a lot of people's issues is that you spend 22 minutes with this part and then it feels kind of completely divorced from the rest of the story, even though a character from it ends up showing up later in the film, yada, yada, yada. But when you look at the way that is structured, and then you look at the more macro level movie, it makes perfect sense. It needs to be there. And it's a beautifully filmed moment. You talked about the scene that around the bonfire that just made me laugh, and I laughed at it watching it a second time, because it's so out of the ordinary. It's so what the fuck. It's so cosmic.
Yep.
And it just took me on that journey. And, you know, there's sort of like a Ring aspect to it, with sort of like the urban legend of the empty man that teens summon by blowing into a bottle on the edge of a dark bridge. Like, it's kind of a silly, but you see where that image started and where that kind of began. And, you know, I love this movie.
It was almost in my top, because I was so fucking surprised by how incredibly sprawling and daring and wild this movie is. Like, the chances.
It's a wild piece of filmmaking.
It's a wild piece of filmmaking. And it's like, it shouldn't work, but it does. And it's fucking great to watch it happen in front of you. And you're like, what is going on? Who is what is going on here? And then you're like, oh, it all comes together.
Yeah. And for me, any movie that's going to take that giant swing and, you know, try to be an ambitious fucking movie, even if it doesn't completely work. And I think there are some plot points in here. I'm particularly referencing these two cops that he ends up going to talk to that I don't necessarily think, unless they're part of the cult, I don't know exactly how it works. There's a lot of little plot holes that I think detractors probably will bother. But for me, it's taking wild swings. It's trying to be ambitious. It's trying to do the thing. And I loved it. I loved every moment of it. And I loved it even more on a second watch. I was kind of afraid that I was going to not like it and that the kind of cracks would kind of show. But no, I think it's a stunning piece of cinema. And it's the reason I go see movies. So it's my number 4.
Cool.
All right.
Okay. Top
3 now.
Top 3. Okay.
What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Titane. From Julia Ducournau. I finally saw this movie, and it is so weird. It is both a slasher and a family drama, and it's got trans identity and car fucking and having a car baby, and it's so weird, and it's so fucking good. It is beautiful. It is disgusting. It is so much more heartfelt than I could have ever expected. And it just blew me away with how Julia Ducournau was just like, here's what you think this movie is going to be, and then here's what it actually is. Because it starts off with this woman who has been in a horrible car accident, who has a metal plate in her head, and who is shown kind of like having a weird, kind of a sexual attraction to cars. It's like a little bit more abstract than you think. And then she actually has sex with the car. Like, it's like abstract at first, and then she actually, you know, there is a fucking scene with the car. Like, let's be completely honest here. Like, that happens. But she's also a serial killer and kills people with, like, the pin that holds her hair up, and she stabs it into their ears. And so, you know, she's a serial killer, and then you see her killing a couple other people, and she goes on this, like, crazy kind of killing spree in this house. And then she is like, oh, I need to disappear. So she does what any logical person would do. And she cuts her hair and breaks her nose and says that she is a missing child. Like, she is the missing child of a family. And a son. So she binds her chest with ace bandages. Don't do that, guys. That is very bad for you. Don't ever bind with ace bandages. That will do irreparable damage to your body. And is pretending to be a firefighter's son who has been gone for 10 years. And it becomes this really weird drama about found family. And there's an incredible needle drop where he is listening to there's a Future Island song that comes on. And it's all these like firefighter men, so like buff guys, like dancing in this pink light, smoking cigarettes to this song. And then the main firefighter captain, played by Vincent Lindon, comes out and just starts dancing, and it's just like this moment of freedom that is just so beautiful. And this movie has just stuck in my brain because it is so many things, and it's disgusting, and it's heartfelt, and it's sad, and it's weird, and it's just one of these movies that kind of like defies any kind of genre definition in a way that I so appreciate. And I love that it's Julia Ducournau. she just keeps, like you already mentioned her with the Servant episode with the pussy hand, and she did Raw, and she just knows how to make these movies about female characters that are not always, are not wholesome. Like these, like Alexia, played by Agatha Russell, who's fucking incredible. She sucks. Like she's a bad person. But this movie also makes you kind of see like that trajectory. Like it's just so good. It's hard to talk about because there's so many things that are just like incredible about this movie. So this is my top 3.
Yeah, it's good.
For me,
it's a good one.
Yeah, wow. She gives birth to a car baby. It's so fucking weird. Like it doesn't sound like it should work and like be so incredibly emotional, but here we are. Woo!
Here we are in 2021.
Okay, what is your number 3?
So my number 3, when I saw this in the summer of 2020, I immediately thought it would be on the tops of my list of last year. But the joke was on me because literally a week after I watched it, A24 decided to release it in 2021 on Epix of all places. And the last time they did that was in my opinion, buried the hole in the ground by releasing it on Epix. And it made me mad with this movie because this movie deserves to have the sort of rollout that a lot of A24 movies get, particularly their sort of, elevated, I'm going to use that word in quotations, like genre pieces. I think this one needs to be talked about, and it is Saint Maud. It kind of had a muted response because of the pandemic, but I rewatched it recently for the first time since summer of 2020 to see if it held up, and I still think that it is a fascinating exploration of queer desire, religious ecstasy, and sexual repression. And so it is about this woman named Maud, who was a hospital nurse until tragedy happened and she ended up getting fired from her job. And so she is now, I think it's called a palliative care nurse, working for a former dancer who is dying from lymphoma. And Amanda, the dancer, who is channeling Meryl Streep to the point that I had to constantly look at her up on IMDb to verify that it wasn't Meryl Streep. She has this female sex worker that comes to the house every so often, and Maud, who is deeply religious, seems both intrigued yet appalled by the behavior. And writer-director Rose Glass, I think, does a fantastic job of putting us in Maud's shoes.
Her spiky, spiky shoes.
Oh my God, yes, that moment. But she kind of gives us access to her interior monologue, where we find that this outwardly humble woman who seems like, just the sort of like the perfect servile person is secretly very vain, and she quietly lords her godliness over others. But she's also given to religious fits that give her orgasms, and she ends up being fired because she abuses her patient, and it sends her down this destructive spiral. But because we're in her head for the entirety of the film, we're kind of willing to believe all the supernatural events that she is seeing because we are so deeply there with her and we're so used to hearing her voice that, by the end of the day, and the movie also kind of takes us on that kind of possession, that kind of Catholic idea where like devil's real, evil's real. And so when we watch that, we're just assuming that all of the stuff that's happening around her is that devilish way that is, bursting forth quite literally into the world. And she is the person that's able to stop it. But it's not until, as we talked about before we did our top 10, that final half second that Saint Maud reveals its intent. And it's a vicious movie. It's a queer movie because I honestly think she is a queer woman that is stuck, unable to kind of embrace her queerness. And I think that this movie also would pair well with Benedetta, another movie that is also about queer desire and religious ecstasy, but in a completely different way. I think this movie is fantastic. I thought it was going to be a little higher on my list, but the more I thought about my other two, it sort of kind of started bumping it down a bit.
I'm going to just spoil this. It's my number 2. Because I'm next. My number 2 is next. Yep. I figure we'll just talk about them in tandem. So Saint Maud is my number 2. Because of everything you talked about. And that last half second, it just says, haha, fuck you. That's what you thought this movie was. Like, haha. And you're like, how? That's incredible that you did that to me. And like this scream and the flames. And you're just like, oh my God, you just flipped this entire movie on its head in half a second. And like, that is so fucking cool. And it's another like incredible piece of horror indie filmmaking by women. and this kind of deep dive into a woman's mind who like is an unreliable narrator who is a pretty bad person, actually, because you like you said, you think that she is a good person at the beginning, like godly and kind, but then you realize that everything she does is because she wants to seem better than everybody else, and she's actually pretty nasty. And it's just so incredible to see how they break this up. And also I read an article by J.D. Gravitt, who is a friend of the show, about the incredible use of shadow and light to kind of depict Maud's mental state. So there's this like really incredible kind of tension with the cinematography to kind of go with like her ecstasy and her exaltations and kind of like when she is thinking her darker thoughts versus when she is like in her godly state. And it's like a really interesting kind of use of that.
Is that a train?
It's a train. Are you done?
Excuse me.
Okay.
Talking here.
But yes, that it's just such an incredible piece of filmmaking that takes that religious, like women being in religious ecstasy to a different level of it being villainy. But putting you in her shoes, it's just like the theme of a lot of my top movies is complicated women directed by women. So like shocking that this movie's in my top is like one of my top movies of the year. But it's just so well done. And Rose Glass, like I cannot wait to see what this woman makes next. Like she is like this movie is so incredibly complex for a movie that's actually pretty short. Like it's not a long movie.
Oh, it's really short.
Like you said, I'm so angry that A24 did not do this movie better, like justice. I have a postcard on my wall of Morfydd Clark doing the whole like when she's having that orgasm on the stairs, like up on my wall, because like it's just a movie again that uses orgasms. Like I love when horror movies use orgasms such a fascinating way, especially when women direct it and like have like the female pleasure be also horrifying, and it's just really fascinating and cool. And A24 just fucked this movie over, and I'm so sad about it because it deserves so much more than what it got, and I'm sad. But
yeah,
that is my number 2. Not my number 2 pick of the year. What is your number 2 pick of the year? I'm very curious to see what your number 2 and 1 picks are, because we did not have a lot of overlap this year, which is incredible.
We sure didn't.
We did not have a lot of overlap.
Although this one is a little bit of an overlap.
Yeah,
honestly, I thought this movie, again, would be my top choice of the year. And both it and Saint Maud were both kind of angling for that number 1 spot.
Your number 1?
But ultimately, it kind of slipped to number 2, and that's not a slam against this movie. But this movie is, I mean, you kind of already talked about it. It's about queer acceptance, found families, unconditional love, unconditional understanding, car fucking, serial killers. Yes, we're 2 for 2 for Julia Ducournau. I'm officially a Julia Ducournau stan.
Why you were so quiet about that one? I was like, this is weird. Oh, I know what your number 1 is now. Okay.
Yeah, my number 2 is Titane.
You're being very quiet about Titane, and I thought you liked that movie. What's happening? We had our 2 and our 3 swapped. Aw,
we did.
Cute. Oh, I love
Isn't
it.
it?
I love that. That makes me happy.
And honestly, the reason why this one was swapped is we have a queer allegory here. It's a queer story. And what really, when I started thinking about this movie again, I mean, I have notes written down, and you basically covered all of it. You know, the idea, some people would call this like movie not horror. I wouldn't call it horror. Some people, I don't think. Some people would call it horror adjacent, but it uses genre accoutrements from the story of a serial killer who goes on a slightly hilarious murder spree. I love that moment.
What the fuck are you doing?
It kind of reminds me of actually the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I when I rewatch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and I see the moment where Leatherface, kills someone and then pulls him in, and he's like, and then someone else comes into his house. He's like, fuck, where are these people coming from? And that's how I felt with this. Really, she kills someone, and all of a sudden there's more people coming in, and there's more people, and she ends up going on this whole long murder spree because people just keep popping out of nowhere.
She literally says,
like, what
there's
the fuck?
more of you?
Yes. But it uses the, car fucking, and she's pregnant with a car baby. And there's an understated tension of her kind of infiltrating a man's home, masquerading as his lost son. That is just, there's like a ticking time bomb, quite literally, in her stomach of, that she's trying to pretend to be a man. And at some point that belly is going to show through. And so there's all these genre trappings and there's tropes, but underneath it, there's this beating heart about acceptance. And what I think is so special about this film is that you can tackle it from so many different lenses. You can look at it from a feminist reading to one on gender. You can look at the way that it kind of dissects performative masculinity. You can look at the way that the film destructs the kind of serial killer narrative, or you can explore it through trauma. But for me, as a queer person, what really struck me is this idea of this woman finding familial acceptance from a chosen family. And that movie, that really is what kind of elevated this to my number 2, because it's like she finds this man who doesn't seem like would be a perfect father for her. And yet he is. And when he discovers the truth, he's like, it's okay.
And he's like, you're my son no matter what.
And that's love that any queer person would kill for.
Yep.
So it's my number 2, mostly for a lot of things that you talked about. And I don't want to beat a dead horse. This movie is just, it's so good. I love the way that it explores unconditional love from someone who isn't related to her, but just loves her unconditionally. It's really good.
All right.
Number 1. And I'm pretty sure I know what yours is. But what is it, Mary Beth?
So my number 1 is a film that has kicked my ass up and down the street, emotionally, mentally, not quite physically yet, but we'll see. It's a movie that means so much to me. Violation.
Yeah.
Why am I getting emotional? Who knows why I'm getting emotional right now. But this movie is rape revenge movie. And, rape revenge movies, particularly ones directed by women. This is co-directed by Madeline Sims-Fewer and Dusty Mancinelli. It's a woman and man duo. It is a rape revenge movie, but not in the way that you would expect. This is very much a rape revenge movie that does not want to glorify revenge, but actually wants to show you what happens when you get that revenge. And it is told in a non-linear way, which really reflects the experience of PTSD in the wake of sexual assault. The revenge scene is so fucking harrowing, but incredible in how you see her. Well, it's like she seduces the man who rapes her, who basically tells her that she's full of shit and all this stuff. And then she basically kills him and cuts him into pieces and finds ways to get rid of his body. And it's disgusting, and it doesn't shy away from her vomiting at the sight of all this, of the steps she does to boil the bones and to make it. She goes through this painstaking process to hide what she did, and it's so hard to watch. But what it does is it just feels it just feels real in terms of what happens when you're sexually assaulted, how you feel. And then I've never killed somebody for revenge, but that reality of that guilt and what that emotional state is, you got rid of this person, but there isn't catharsis, and you're finally thinking about the consequences of your actions. And she's not a good person. This is not a rape revenge movie that wants you to be she's so great, I can't Miriam, you don't want me, you're oh yeah, Miriam's so great. Miriam is not a good character. She's a bitch. And I love that, because it's not trying to be look at this good woman who must get her revenge for she is innocent and a man sullied her. It's no, she has issues. She has issues with her partner, and she herself almost sexually assaults her partner. And you never see women, the women representations of women sexually assaulting men. And all the things I'm saying make it sound what the fuck, why do you like this movie so much? But that's why I love this movie. As someone who has been sexually assaulted, as someone who spends a lot of her time researching and watching these movies and interrogating them from a critical standpoint, this movie gets so much shit right. And it's so hard to watch. It's heartbreaking, but it is so important. And it is a movie that I think I can't recommend to everybody, but I think if you're someone who likes who is interested in kind of sexual assault on screen, PTSD, I think this is definitely a movie for you to check out. Not all survivors are going to want to watch this because it's fucking hard to watch, but it's a movie that I haven't been able to get out of my head. I've written thousands of words about, and it just will always be a very special film to me. So that's my number one.
Yeah, I can't add anything else to that. It
kicks your ass.
Yeah.
It kicks your ass.
It kicks your ass.
But
What you said, 100%. Can't disagree. And I can't say it any better. So.
It's my number one of the year. What's you? I know yours, and I think it's very different from what my number one is.
Just a little bit. So we're at the end of the list, and my list has been filled. My list has been filled with movies that surprise me because as I'm about to turn 41 next month, I have seen so many movies with similar plots and storylines, and it takes a lot to genuinely surprise me.
Terry is surprised. Take a shot.
Any of my movies could have been the top one. Any of these top three that I talked about could have been the top one because they both, I think, are interesting in their own ways. And this movie was actually going to be lower on my list, but I had to go with it because, again, it genuinely surprised the absolute fuck out of me. And that movie is a little film called Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. I'm kidding. It's Malignant. Though if this was like a best of the year list for any movie, that would be quite possibly at the top because I love that movie.
Cool.
Okay, but to kind of like pair it off of what you said earlier, when we get to the new year, you'll hear us talk about one of James Wan's earliest films, a movie that had obvious studio interference and could have almost did derail both James' career and Leigh Whannell's careers. And we watched that movie recently for the podcast, and it only validated that Malignant is James Wan operating at the height of his talent. It's a movie that I think has taken his entire career into consideration and tells a story that is part crime thriller, part ghost story, part camp what the fuckery, and completely bananas in its execution. But it's also a love letter to genre that understands genre. When we talked about Malignant on the podcast, I mentioned how it kind of takes giallo aesthetics and storytelling devices, particularly of the Argento subset, and it kind of spins its own story into a culmination of the last 4 decades of genre. And it gives us a villain with as much personality as an 80s slasher, a distinctive weapon that I desperately want a copy of, action sequences that are like Wan at the peak of his talent, his ability to craft set pieces, enough spooky shit to unnerve, and a reveal that genuinely shocked me for reasons that I wasn't expecting. It's so like
good. It's just ridiculous.
It is. Because the twist isn't that she has a malignant tumor brother a la Basket Case. That I figured out in the very beginning. It's like, obviously, this whatever tumor was on her is now masquerading around and killing people a la Basket Case. No, the twist is the twin is still fucking inside of her body and has been controlling her like a puppet. Dead silence. It's batshit bananas, and it's honestly the most fun I've had watching a movie this year, aside from maybe Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. This movie is just, it's cuckoo bananas.
We need to cut out the cancer.
Oh my God.
Like, when one of your opening lines is that, you're like, I am ready for
Gabriel,
a very
you've been a bad
good
boy.
time. It's like
And I'm also upset with people writing it off as not being a giallo film because, excuse me, it understands the tropes, particularly, as I said, the Argento tropes, with like this idea of the protagonist misunderstanding, misseeing, miss something, what is actually happening. You see that in a lot of Argento's films, from Tenebrae to Deep Red to majority of his films, where the protagonist sees something, misunderstands it, doesn't have the information, is blacked out, and doesn't completely get what they're seeing. And then it's revealed later on, they start to realize what they actually saw. And this movie takes that and says, yeah, oh, you saw someone kill someone in a museum and it's actually the other way around. No, motherfucker, this is a fucking tumor in the body. And now we're going to destroy this entire police station. Like,
that fucking
what the
jail
fuck?
scene where Like the reveal, the final reveal that Gabriel is in the back of her fucking head, and he just absolutely wrecks an entire cell full of women.
Perfection.
Like, what the fuck? It's so good.
This is why I go see movies, and this movie was a wake up call to like what I have been missing from movies over the last few years. Like I talked about it with Werewolves Within. I'm missing that fun. And this movie was like, oh, you want to have some fun? Let me show you how a fucking master is going to sell you fun. So yes, this movie does not have the emotional resonance of Titane. It doesn't have the sort of interesting thematic devices that were used in Saint Maud. But let me tell you, this motherfucker is a great time in the movies, and it is cinema.
Oh, but okay. I do have one thing I want to say about Malignant that that is probably me reading too much into it, but I have a lot of feelings as someone who is a domestic violence survivor about how it deals so she gets her head. The reason Gabriel wakes up is because her husband smashes her head into a wall. It's kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
I am all about this reading that I have of it as being like that abuse woke up Gabriel. And like, look, I know this movie's fucking batshit. I know that that's not the point. But there's something really interesting there about like how her being a victim of this domestic violence awakens something in her that then gets violence against the people that perpetrated violence against her. And again, it's Gabriel who is trying to get revenge. But there's something really fascinating there, I think, about a kind of a thought in there about how awakening rage against the person who abused you and kind of harnessing that rage in a way to get some kind of justice.
I don't think you're far from that point, because I think that that's absolutely a valid point, because it's kind of trauma begets trauma, because it's trauma inflicted on her that wakens him, and he's all of a sudden, fuck, look at all these people that wronged me, now I'm going to go fuck them up. It is sort of like that kind of revenge tale told from two siblings that are attached to each other.
Yeah, but then she reclaims her empowerment from him, because then he can be seen as an abusive person because he takes over her body and uses it for his own gain. And then she can kind of, at least at the end, and who knows if there'll be the Malignant cinematic universe, but she reclaims that power over her body and finds a way to get agency. And like, for most of this movie, she has no agency over herself, either in her relationships or with Gabriel, and she finally finds it. So I think there's something really interesting there about finding agency in the face of being abused by a family member and by a partner. So something I really thought about, like the second time I watched it, I was like, actually, there's something really fascinating in here about finding empowerment in yourself and like reclaiming yourself, and like how that rage can feel like really good in the moment, but then like finding a way to kind of take that rage back as your own without it being uncontrollable. So
yeah, that's why it's my number one. Well, she said no. It's not.
Malignant
that is,
is
but I didn't even think about
crazy,
that.
but also has an interesting kind of message. I mean, James Wan probably was like, "No, it's just fucking batshit." I'm like, "Yeah, but also you kind of made a cool movie about this kind of thing." So you know what? I'll take it.
You know, I would really actually like to talk with Akilah Cooper.
Yes. Oh my God. Like, Black woman co-wrote the script, everybody. Cool as fuck. Give Akilah Cooper some love on this one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that's it.
So
that's our
that's our top 10.
That's our top 10. I'm happy that it was a little bit different than last year, because I honestly felt like last year it was like, I'll tell mine and be like, okay, well, I'm going to talk about mine because that's my next one, you know? And it was like, we didn't really have that much overlap on here.
No.
I mean, some movies, but in way different positions.
I love that our 2 and 3 were very similar, though. That makes my heart happy. But, yeah, everybody. Well, Happy New Year.
That's it for 2021. Wild.
Thank God. Hopefully 2022 is better. But at this point, we said that last year. Who knows?
Yeah.
But regardless, we thank all of you for listening to another year of us and our guests. And it means the absolute world to us that people
really
listen
does.
And you guys like interact and like our stuff. It's just like, it's crazy looking back on the past year and like who we've talked to. And it's just like so humbling and it's just so cool. And, you know, we just appreciate all of you who show so much support for us. It really does make all of this feel like, okay, there are people listening to us. Like, you know, it's great. Even if only one person listened, it's worth it. So, yeah.
So thank you, everyone, because honestly, podcasting is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of planning. There's a lot of stuff that we have to do behind the scenes. But your responses to us and your listening and reaching out to us on Twitter and all that kind of stuff makes it all worthwhile. And we hope that this has been a good year for you for listening for us. We hope that next year is a better year for everyone. Because I don't know about you, Mary Beth, but this year had some great moments, but also kind of kicked me in the ass.
Yeah. Yep.
I think you can relate.
I can very much relate.
So here's hoping that 2022 is not that.
Yeah, seriously.
Here's hoping that is all the good stuff.
Yeah.
And minimizing the bad stuff.
Yeah. We're hoping you guys watch a lot of good movies. And with that, on that note, we would love to hear what your favorite movies of the year were.
Yeah.
Did you agree with our picks? Did we have some egregious things that we left off of our list? We'd love to hear what your favorite films were this year. You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can just let us know on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And if you really want to help us celebrate the new year, go out there and make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're leaving a rating. Make sure you're leaving a review. I sound like a broken record, but it really helps with the algorithms that rule the eternity of everything.
Yep.
So please.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everyone, once again, for everything. Please stay safe out there. Stay creepy, and Happy New Year.
Won't somebody please think of the children? Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children!
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.